I want to use this occasion to establish a transition from a backstory about the Scarlet Letter that's already been filmed, in which discussed Hawthorne's relationship to the characters in the Scarlet Letter that he imagines as his way of undoing an ancestral curse that he interprets his having been turned into an object of public shame in the mid-19th century into the genealogical origin of. He's presently cursed because he's inherited all of the guilt that his ancestors accrued when they accused women in the Puritan community of being witches, usually in order to get their property, because they were either single or widowed. And I want to wonder with you, why do you think Hawthorne moved from the condition of simultaneously acknowledging his responsibility for the ancestral sin, the sins of the fathers, and his desire to undo it? Why did his desire to undo it put him into relation with the characters in the Scarlet Letter? Initially, it's almost like a Wizard of Oz scene, isn't it? We're in that custom house, we feel it's all flat, two-dimensional, it's in black and white. But then when we go into this discontinued Puritan past, which usually is understood to be clearly, in moral terms, merely black and white, good versus evil, and yet the whole thing seems in color. He sees that red rose. We see the scarlet in the Scarlet Letter. It's as if everything has assumed a much more vivid, almost illuminated, surely luminous life when he crosses the portal from the custom house into this wonderful realm of the Scarlet Letter. Hester walking out the prison with the child.
Right, with the roses.
And the rose.
Right, and the ghost of Anne Hutchinson.
The
right?
ghost, you tell us about the ghost. You know Anne Hutchinson.
Right.
I feel you sometimes embody Anne Hutchinson. So could you talk about that specter of Anne?
Right, but this is interesting. The triangulation in that novel is fascinating. The fact that in 1840s, when he's writing the novel, that he goes back to the 1640s to somehow find a subject matter that allows him to talk about shame, that allows him to talk about national identity, because it is really a novel about American and national identity. That
Before
eagle,
America existed.
Exactly, but that eagle, right? The eagle is the eagle on top of the customs house that he kind of meditates on. He's thinking about America in the 1840s, right? But he has to go back to the 1640s, to this Puritan past, which he imagined somehow as shaming this woman. And actually, there's been research done about laws. He says it was an ancient colonial law referring to the Plymouth colony, the first colony. That law actually doesn't come into being, the law punishing adultery with an AD, which doesn't mean that it's AD, and then you have Arthur Dimmesdale, right? So it's instead of an A. That doesn't come into being until the 1658, we think. Although there were cases around the 1640s in which men and women are being tried and punished for adultery in various ways. Some of them have to wear a badge. The records say, we don't know what the badge would have said. It wasn't a death sentence, so that's kind of interesting, because he, in the book he implies that they could have sentenced her to death, right? And it wasn't branding. That, you know what I'm saying? So he's really taking some license. He's really ramping it up.
Imaginative license.
He's ramping this up. Okay. But the ghost of Anne, so Anne Hutchinson comes over in the 1633-4, one of the early groups. She is a fan of John Cotton. John Cotton is one of the competitors for some of the more mainstream Puritan ministers, and he is preaching a gospel of kind of immediate revelation. He doesn't say it that way, but that's really kind of, he's edging towards what we call this kind of antinomian view of Puritanism, that you could have an individual relationship with God. And was fine, everybody kind of liked it, except that it left the ministers out and it left out the political structures. And she came to the colonies and felt a license to preach. She was also a midwife, so she was there helping women out in their hour of need when they were often considered most vulnerable. And she began to kind of preach a very Cottonian view of salvation. And it was when she started to preach to what they call promiscuous audiences, that is men and women together, that kind of all hell broke loose, because Winthrop really didn't, she was just threatening the order. And various other things happened. She called out several ministers as not being saved, and in fact said that, or not preaching the true gospel. She forwarded her brother-in-law, Wheelwright. There was other things happening. Eventually, they brought her up on charges. There was a trial. She was excommunicated from the court. And during the trial, I mean, she had a very sharp tongue. She was very smart. She was very intense. They somehow got her they tripped her up, people argue, into saying, yes, God spoke to me individually, and I have this kind of license to act according to my own conscience, outside of the bounds of the church or the state. And once she said that, it was all over. What Winthrop does, which is kind of interesting, he's got a text called The Short Story, in which he actually connects her seductive and distorted words with a kind of stillbirth that she has. So she's pregnant at the time. She has the stillbirth. The fetus is buried. He then, at some point, goes and digs it up to kind of look at it, claims it's a monstrous birth, and connects the monstrous birth of her body with the monstrous birth of her brain, in a sense. So she is just made into a monster. She leaves and goes she joins Roger Williams over in Providence, because the Providence colony was actually accepting all these kind of outcasts and ne'er-do-wells. And she eventually then moves to outside of New York City, it's kind of New Amsterdam at the time, and is murdered by a group of Indians. And actually, the Hutchinson State Parkway is named after Anne Hutchinson.